Hi, and welcome here on pierosini.com, the wine show. And well, I'm right about now here in Tuscany. I'm in the region of Bolgheri, which is close to the sea. I am here at the Tenuta dell'Ornellaia, which is the home of, unquestionable, one of the most famous and important wine of Italy, maybe also of the world. And maybe you heard about Masseto, dell'Ornellaia. And I'm really happy to have you here on my show. Axel Heinz, the chief winemaker. Well, welcome here on my show.
Very glad that you host ourselves.
Yeah. So maybe for the people who don't know so much about Tenuta dell'Ornellaia, you can, because I think there's so many special things to say. Maybe you can, add something about the history, the philosophy of La Tenuta.
Tenuta dell'Ornellaia is a quite new estate, really, because it was only founded in the very beginning of the 1980s.
Okay.
In a time where the area of Bolgheri was not particularly well known, although one of the most famous Italian wines was already produced in Bolgheri at that period. To name it, it was Sassicaia, obviously, which was the first wine to put Bolgheri on the map. People tended to refer to Sassicaia rather as a super Tuscan than to refer to it as a Bolgheri wine. Sassicaia had introduced the Bordeaux grape varietals, which everybody grows in Bolgheri nowadays, in the late 1940s, and have started to put their wines on the market by the end of the 60s. And further development only took place from the 1980s on. A couple of estates, among which dell'Ornellaia were created in the 1980s, and only in the middle of the 1990s, Bolgheri actually got its own appellation, its DOC, how they're called in Italy, for the red wines, and it's the only DOC in Tuscany in which the Bordeaux grape varietals are the most important ones, and not the traditional Tuscan grape varietals.
Like Sangiovese?
Like Sangiovese, exactly.
Okay. So there was, from the beginning, there was always the aim to produce high quality wines. There were people who were involved, like Andrei Chelichev, which passed away actually.
Well, he passed away quite some time ago, I think in 1994. He actually was the first consultant for dell'Ornellaia when dell'Ornellaia was created, and consulted until the late 1980s when he retired.
Okay, and Thibaut Gall.
And Thibaut Gall, who was the first winemaker at dell'Ornellaia. He arrived, I think, about 1988 or 1989 to dell'Ornellaia and stayed there for about 10 years before he went back to Hungary and other places in order to develop his ideas.
So I think really curious, you're originally from Germany, a German winemaker in Tuscany. I mean, okay, we are in Europe, but how does it come that when did you join Tenuta dell'Ornellaia?
I joined in dell'Ornellaia in 2005, even if it's true that my winemaking background is actually not German, it's rather French. And as a matter of fact, while I was born and grew up in Germany, of a German father, my mother is actually French and she's from Bordeaux, and that's how my love to wine developed. I went to study
to Cabernet Sauvignon as
well. Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, because I worked a lot in Saint-Emilion there. So I studied in Bordeaux. I've been working in Saint-Emilion for about 5 years, and then I came to Tuscany because this is another beautiful place, and there was the wonderful opportunity to be in charge of dell'Ornellaia.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I arrived today here. It's really amazing. It's, I think, for me, one of the most beautiful wineries I've seen yet. And okay, but let's talk about a few words about what's so special about Bolgheri, the microclimate. It's we are like 1 hour away from Chianti Classico. 1 hour and a half.
And it's a totally different world because obviously everybody sees that things are different in Bolgheri because we do not grow the same grape varieties. Everything is focused on Cabernet Sauvignon, on Merlot, and also Cabernet Franc, the Bordeaux grape varietals. Even if you do have Sangiovese to a very small extent, you do have some Syrah, but really the main grape varietals are Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon, and then comes Cabernet Franc. People might think this is just a choice of international grape varieties, but actually the choice is very much related to the very specific microclimate. You're only 1 hour from Chianti, but it's a totally different world. We're close to the sea, the climate is generally milder, it's less cold in the winter, but then less extremely cold in the summer, which is very useful. For instance, this year, in 2011, we're just right in the harvest, and there has been a huge heat wave in Tuscany in the last 10 days, but here temperatures never went beyond 35 degrees. So there's a very warm, sunny, but mild microclimate, which is very favorable for the Bordeaux grape varietals.
Yeah.
And then there are the soils that are alluvial with quite deep soils with a lot of clay, but also a lot of stones.
So some red, some
there are
iron, or it's
there is in some places there is some iron, but the best, really very best terroirs in Bolgheri are dominated by soils with a rather high amount of clay, but very deep, that give a good supply of water, which is very useful in a dry year. So which explains how you can grow successfully Merlot, which is a grape varietal where everybody says it does not well in too warm climate, but here it has the sort of moisture and freshness it gets from the soil that allows it to ripen, but not to get too jammy and too flabby.
So we're going to taste today two wines. We have the second wine.
Exactly.
Is Nuove, 2009 and 2008 Ornellaia.
Ornellaia.
Okay, just to have some few words about Nuove. When was the first vintage from Nuove? What was the idea?
It's quite a recent wine because the first vintage was only 1997.
Okay.
The first vintage of Ornellaia had been 1985.
Good vintage, right?
Excellent vintage, but a time when Ornellaia had furtherly developed and had some already adult vineyards, but also younger vineyards, and the need to do a stricter selection. So the idea behind Nuove was, of course, to be capable to making the best possible selection for Ornellaia, while still making an important and a very nice wine. So it's really in every way a true second wine as we know them from Bordeaux, for instance. So it's really a selection of all the lots that primarily come from young vineyards that are not worthy to get into the final blends of Ornellaia, so they are used for Nuove. It's a decision we tend to take quite late, so we're here in the barrel room, and what you see here are all wines that are divided still by vineyard lots. So we do a lot of separate vinifications according to the different vineyard sites. Then we keep the wine separate in barrel for at least 1 year, and then only we decide on the blending. It's really a quality choice, so we taste each single lot and we try to determine if it's good for Ornellaia or if it's not quite at the level, and then we blend it into Nuove. So really a second wine and very much a quality selection, lot per lot, barrel per barrel, of which is good enough for Ornellaia and which is not quite at the level. Knowing that obviously it still needs to be a very good wine because it needs to be a serious wine that has its own character, its own quality level. So we very much see it as one of the great bottlings, possibly as one of the great bottlings in Bolgheri. Obviously there should be a reasonable difference between Ornellaia and Nuove, but still needs to be a wine that reflects the style of the estate and of course be a wine of high quality. So I think
we could
ready to taste. It is, well, both wines are made out of the 4 Bordeaux grape varietals which we grow in the estate. So there is Cabernet Sauvignon, of course, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot, which has been authorized since the vintage 2003. And all 4 grape varietals will be present in both of the blends, either Ornellaia or Nuove. Usually there is a slightly higher amount of Merlot in Nuove in order to make the wine a little bit more approachable, a little bit more soft and early drinking, because one of the advantages of a good second wine is also that you can enjoy it as a young wine while you're waiting for the top bottling that needs a little bit more time in the cellar.
Absolutely.
Whereas Ornellaia has always been traditionally a blend dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. It has gone from a quite high proportion of Cabernet Sauvignon in the very first vintages to a more balanced blend between Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot towards the end of the 90s. But today we tend to use also quite a lot of Cabernet Franc because we're very happy with the way Cabernet Franc performs here in Bolgheri. So the amount of Cabernet Franc has been rising constantly in the last years because we've got some vineyards that are coming now to full maturity and delivering excellent wine. So we put them obviously in Ornellaia.
So let's have a sniff, check out the wine. So it's like, it's blossom absolutely, it's quite open, really open. You have a lot of fruit, like black fruit,
It is, well, here we're tasting vintage 2009, which was a very warm vintage. It was the second hottest summer after 2003, which was something that we were a little bit worried about initially because, well, 2003 was quite an extreme vintage here, not only here in Tuscany, but in many places of Europe, actually. But there are wines that have had a very good evolution during the aging. They're very open, aromatic wines that have ripe fruit, but it's not overripe, it's not jammy. So there's really a nice intensity of, as you were saying, of black cherries, very ripe plums. But there's also a little spiciness. So it's
minerality for me. Yes,
a little bit, which is something we very frequently find in the wines of Bolgheri.
Yeah, but you have some notes of graphite. For me, it's like I like it. So. Stupendous. It's full-bodied, it's good stuff. It's full of juice, full of this black fruit with aromas with pepper, a spiciness you're telling, and it's the acidity is well balanced, good tannins. Wow, really, and it lingers absolutely long. I think this is the wine is really for now, absolutely approachable, but with a good potential. I think 10 years, 12, maybe 15.
You know, that's probably the most difficult thing to achieve with a second wine. So obviously, you want it to be approachable, but you also don't want it to be too easy. No, approachable would maybe need a wine that is very soft, very fruity, but hasn't got a lot of texture, hasn't got a lot of density. Serre Nuove is ideally really a wine, and I think 2009 comes very close to that, a wine that is approachable, but has the sort of structure, the sort of backbone to age. And as a matter of fact, although we recommend to drink the wine relatively young, we also realize that it has definitely 8 to 10 years of potential. And if today you open a bottle of 2004, 2000 wine, the wines have just come around beautifully and have actually improved. So it's definitely also a wine that can age, but you can also enjoy it young. You have a little bit the choice. Of course, a good wine is always good, as people say, but it's true. But we'll taste Ornellaia afterwards. Ornellaia is definitely a wine that ideally requires 5, 8, 10 years to really fully blossom.
Yes. Well, anyway, 2009 Le Serre Nuove wine, I really can recommend. So then we are, heading to the next wine. Is this the second wine? No, you can say a second wine for Ornellaia because Masseto. No. Okay, this is another story. Absolutely,
it's another story entirely. Ornellaia is really the flagship wine of the estate. Masseto is something different.
Totally.
It's a separate vineyard. It's Merlot. It's a different story. So it's not a top bottling of Ornellaia. It's a different wine entirely.
It's the same winemaker.
It's the same winemaker, but you know that happens in other places as well. But it's really truly a different wine. And I would say that Ornellaia is even the more representative wine because that comes really from all of our vineyards. Today Ornellaia is 99 hectares of vineyards, all distributed in the northern part of Bolgheri. And it's really the selection of all the best that comes from the estate. So it's very representative of what the style, the identity of Tenuta dell'Ornellaia is. So this is actually the true top wine of the estate, and Masseto is another top wine. It's the wine we love, obviously, but it's something different. So I would recommend we'll taste a great vintage, which is 2008. It's a vintage that has the reputation to be a little bit irregular all across Tuscany. It's true that it was cold in the spring, then very hot in the summer, then again cool. But again, the coast is not central Tuscany. In the coast, we really consider this as one of the best vintages ever. And it's true that here on the coast, it's quite a strange story, but we've been recently very lucky with all the vintages in 88 was a great vintage. It was great vintage all over Tuscany. But 98, for instance, was a vintage that was good, but not exceptional in central Tuscany, but a great vintage in Bolgheri. And the same thing happened in 2008 again. So probably 2018 will be another great vintage in Bolgheri. But now we're up to 2008, which is a very classical Ornellaia that has a little bit less than 60% Cabernet Sauvignon, 27% of Merlot, then some 12 or 13% of Cabernet Franc, and a little dash of Petit Verdot.
Okay, and the aging of the wine, it's new barrels, 100%? Or
no,
you keep it more like 70, 80%?
Yeah, it's rather 70%. We usually, for the second wine, Le Serre Nuove, we use 25, 30% of new barrels. And for Ornellaia, we use no more than 70% of new oak.
Okay.
In the case of 2008, yet we let the wines age a little bit longer than usual. Usually they spend between 15 and 18 months. 2008, which is a very dense, very structured vintage, we decided that it needed a little bit extra time in the barrel, and it spent almost 21 months in barrel.
Okay. So, well, the color is like, yeah, it's deeper, it's more opaque than the Serre Nuove.
Yeah.
Well, beautiful.
You will see, 2008 was a vintage of highly concentrated fruit. It was not a very big crop. We only cropped at about 34 hectoliters per hectare. There was little fruit set, then there was a little bit problems with flowering, and then there was very dry weather during the harvest, and that led to extremely concentrated small berries that made wines that have a lot of structure, a lot of color intensity, very dense, but also very fresh and very vibrant wines.
Okay. So it's like, yeah, you feel more the density, you feel it directly. The aromas, they are more, yeah, not together, they are more like, yeah, more complex. You have different aromas. A little bit of, yeah, scorched earth. It's like some tar, smokiness, but it's more the fruit is in the upfront. Oh, beautiful.
A lot of cassis, you know,
Yeah.
that really extremely concentrated crème de
yeah.
cassis, Cabernet Sauvignon fruit,
Yeah.
definitely.
So,
But also nice, I think it's interesting. It is a ripe vintage because there was a part of the harvest that was, especially for Merlot, that was done at quite high temperatures. It was very hot in the beginning of the harvest. But at the same time, you feel that in the ripeness of fruit, but you also have very fresh elements, a little bit of mintiness, a little bit of minerality again,
Yeah.
which makes 2008 a quite interesting vintage because it has sort of the two faces of Bolgheri, the lushness, the ripeness, the opulence, but at the same time very much focus, linearity. So I think it's a very nice vintage to understand the Bolgheri wines.
yeah. And you have like the perfumes of the pine trees here. It's like, oh, the cypress. Whoa. Well, it's young, but it's absolutely accessible. Full of juice as well, like the Serre Nuove, but more dense to the core. Soft tannins, acidity well balanced as well. It's good structured. It lingers really long. Good mouthfeel. Absolutely compliment. It's a, yeah. I think 2008 is a good vintage. Really.
I would say it's a great vintage. We've been quite lucky recently because we had a strain of really fabulous vintages starting with 2001, then 2002, 2003. Well, a little bit more difficult, but still make good wines. 2004, another great vintage. 2005, which again was a little bit more trickier. But then 2006, 2007, 2008, three really great vintages in a row. But all three vintages with quite different personalities and characters, which is quite interesting because that shows that each vintage has its own little story to tell. And when people think that sometimes you hear people saying about the standardization of taste of the wine world, these are three vintage that within the same estate demonstrate how different wines are from one year to another. So I don't think that's really an issue.
That's the amazing thing about wine, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, well, Axel, I'm really thankful for your time. It was a big pleasure for me to have you here on my show. And really, the wines Ornellaia, I think that is, you're doing really a good job, good work.
Trying.
Well, you really are blessed. You're living in a beautiful countryside of Italy. And yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed the clip and had some impressions of La Tenuta dell'Ornellaia. Watch out for next vintages, and I hope I see you in the clip.